Tonight, we walk into a place where breath falters, where soil remembers, and where the dead do more than sleep. This story drifts through shadows, brushes against cold stone, and settles into the darkest corners of a cemetery where something old, something hungry, has finally awakened. Get comfortable, dim your lights, and listen closely. Because once you hear this tale, the graveyard will never feel the same again. The night had been unusually silent, even for Briarwood Cemetery. No wind rustled the ancient oaks that leaned inward like penitents. No crickets chirped. No distant car engine rumbled down the gravel road that led nowhere. It was the kind of silence that didn't just absence sound, it demanded it. As if the earth itself had paused, mid-breath, waiting for something to break the stillness. Lucas Holloway felt it the moment he stepped onto the main path. His boots crunched on frost-laced leaves, but even that sound felt muffled, swallowed by the weight of the dark. He adjusted the strap of his flashlight, its beams slicing through the thick black like a knife through velvet. He'd walked these paths for 3 years now, every night, rain or snow, summer heat or winter's teeth. He knew every cracked headstone, every leaning angel, every moss-choked monument that bore names no living soul could pronounce. He knew them better than he knew his own reflection in the bathroom mirror at 3 a.m. Grave 47 was his favorite. Not because he cared. Not because he believed. But because it was the only one that felt watchful. The stone was crooked, half sunk into the earth, tilted as if bowing to something beneath. Moss had claimed it entirely, thick and green and velvet soft, swallowing the carved letters until only the date remained, 1874. No name. No epitaph. No flowers. No visitors. Not even a single wilted daisy on the anniversary of death. Lucas had once dug around it with a trowel, curious, half expecting to find a hidden plaque or a child's toy buried with the body. He found nothing but cold soil, damp roots, and the faint, coppery scent of old iron. He chalked it up to decay, to time, to the slow, inevitable erosion of memory. He told himself it was just a forgotten grave, one of hundreds in a forgotten place. But he always paused. He never explained why. That night, as his flashlight swept across the mound, the earth moved. It wasn't a collapse. Not a landslide. Not a burrowing fox or a root shifting with the frost. It was a slow, deliberate rising. Lucas stopped. His breath hitched. The beam of his flashlight trembled in his grip. The dirt bulged. Then it cracked out. A thin fissure split the surface, dark and wet, like a mouth opening. A trickle of soil slid down the sides, as if the grave were weeping. Lucas took a step back. His pulse hammered in his throat. He told himself it was the wind. A trick of the light. A trick of the mind. He'd worked nights too long. He was tired. He hadn't slept in 36 hours. He'd eaten nothing but cold coffee and stale granola bars since his last shift ended. He told himself that. Then the hand broke through, pale, mottled with dirt. Fingers curled like claws of bone wrapped in rotting skin. It emerged slowly, deliberately, as if testing the air. The fingers twitched, then stretched, reached, as if searching for warmth, for light, for the sky it hadn't felt in 151 years. Lucas didn't scream. He couldn't. His legs locked. His lungs refused to draw air. His flashlight beam froze on that hand, trembling not from his grip, but from the sheer impossibility of it. Then the second hand rose. Another fissure split the earth beside the first. Another arm, thin as driftwood, emerged, fingers gnarled and blackened at the tips, nails long and cracked like old porcelain. The arm stretched upward, trembling, as if trying to lift something too heavy. The soil around them began to churn, heaving, bubbling, as though the grave were vomiting up its dead. Lucas stumbled backward, his boot catching on a root. He fell hard, the flashlight skidding from his hand, its beams spinning wildly, casting frantic shadows across the headstones. He scrambled to his knees, heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. He wanted to run. He needed to run. But his eyes wouldn't leave the grave. The soil rose again. A shoulder. Then a chest. A figure was pushing itself up from the earth. It was dressed in tattered remnants of Victorian-era clothing. Black wool, frayed at the edges, stained with decades of mud and decay. The coat hung off its frame like a shroud. Its boots were gone, the feet bare and blackened, toes curled like roots seeking purchase. The face was the worst. It was not a skull. Not yet. Not fully. It was what remained of a man who had been buried alive. Eyes sunken, milky, but moving, stared upward. Skin hung in loose, gray folds over hollow cheekbones. Lips were split, cracked, peeled back in a rictus that might have been a smile, or a scream frozen in time. A single strand of hair, white as bone, clung to its temple. Dust fell from its hair like ash. Its jaw moved, slowly, painfully, as if trying to form words it had forgotten how to speak. Lucas's mind screamed. His body did not die. He watched as the corpse lifted its head, its gaze sweeping the cemetery like a blind man learning to see. It didn't look at Lucas, not yet. It looked at the trees. At the stars. At the moon, pale and cold above. As if it had been gone from the world for so long, it needed to relearn its shape. Then its eyes found him, and it smiled. Not a grin. Not a snarl. A recognition. A slow, terrible knowing. And then it spoke. Its voice was not a voice at all. It was the sound of dry leaves dragged across stone. Of earth settling into a newly dug grave. Of a coffin lid closing for the last time. Asterisk. You remembered. Asterisk. Lucas's breath came in ragged gasps. He wanted to bolt. He wanted to vomit. He wanted to pray. But he couldn't move. Couldn't speak. Couldn't blink. The corpse began to rise fully. Its limbs were stiff, joints creaking like rusted hinges, but it moved with a terrible, deliberate grace. It stood tall, thin, impossibly tall, as if the earth had been holding it down, and now, finally, it was free. The soil sloughed off its shoulders like shed skin. Its coat hung in tatters, revealing ribs that pressed against the membrane of its chest like the ribs of a starving animal. It took a step forward. The ground beneath its bare feet cracked. Frost bloomed outward from its toes, spreading in jagged lines like spiderwebs of ice. Asterisk. You remembered. Asterisk. It repeated, softer this time. Almost tender. Lucas found his voice. It came out a whisper, broken, raw. I didn't know you were here. The corpse tilted its head. The movement was slow, deliberate, like a man waking from a century-long dream. Asterisk. No. Asterisk. It sighed. Asterisk. You didn't. But you came. Every night. You always came. Asterisk. Lucas's throat tightened. I was working. You brought me water. The corpse whispered. Asterisk. On the nights the moon was full. You poured it over my stone. You didn't say anything. You never did. But I felt it. I felt the cold. I felt the kindness. Asterisk. Lucas's mind reeled. He remembered. He did remember. He'd done it. He'd done it every full moon for 3 years. He'd brought a thermos of water. He didn't know why. He thought it was stupid. A ritual. A way to feel less alone in the dark. He'd whispered to the stone sometimes, just to break the silence. He told it about his mother's death. About his father leaving. About how he hated his job but couldn't quit because the pay was good and the silence was the only thing that didn't scream at him. He never thought it heard. He never thought it knew. The corpse took another step. The frost spread further, creeping up the gravestones, turning names into ghosts of themselves. Asterisk. I died alone. Asterisk. It said. Asterisk. Buried in silence. No family. No friends. No priest. Just a man who found me in the woods, half dead, coughing blood, begging for water. He buried me because he was afraid. Afraid I'd die on his land. Afraid of what I was. Asterisk. Lucas swallowed. What were you? The corpse raised its hand. Slowly. Carefully. It touched its own chest, where a dark, jagged scar split the rotting fabric. The wound was still open. Not bleeding. Not oozing. But pulsing. A slow, rhythmic throb, like a heartbeat trapped beneath skin and time. Asterisk. I was a doctor. Asterisk. It said. Asterisk. In 1874, they called me a madman. I tried to cure the fever that took half the town. They called it the Black Cough. I studied the sick. I cut open the dead. I learned what the fever did to the blood, to the mind, to the soul. Asterisk. It paused. Its milky eyes fixed on Lucas. Asterisk. They burned my notes. They called me a witch. They locked me in the asylum. But I kept working. I kept trying. And when I fell ill, they buried me alive. Asterisk. Lucas's stomach turned. He remembered reading about it once, years ago, in a crumbling town archive he'd stumbled on while looking for old maps. A physician named Elias Forn. A man who'd vanished during the fever outbreak. Rumored to have experimented on patients. Rumored to have survived the fever himself, and changed. And no one had ever found his grave. Until now. Asterisk. I didn't die. Asterisk. Elias whispered. Asterisk. I transformed. The fever didn't kill me. It rewrote me. My body stopped decaying. My mind kept thinking. I could feel the earth. The roots. The worms. The cold. The silence. I could hear the people above me, weeping, praying, forgetting. I could hear them, and I waited. Asterisk. Lucas's hands shook. Why now? Why tonight? Elias turned his head fully toward him. The movement was slow, unnatural. His jaw cracked like dry timber. Asterisk. Because you stopped bringing the water. Asterisk. Lucas froze. He had. For the last 3 months. He'd been sick. Exhausted. His mother's funeral had been in August. He'd spent weeks in grief, in silence, in numbness. He'd forgotten. He'd stopped coming to the grave. He'd stopped talking to it. He'd stopped remembering. Elias stepped forward again. The frost spread like a tide, swallowing the nearby headstones. The moss on the graves turned black. The trees groaned, their branches twisting inward, as if recoiling from the cold radiating from the corpse. Asterisk. You were the only one who listened. Asterisk. Elias said. Asterisk. The only one who didn't run. The only one who didn't fear me. Even when you didn't know me, you cared. Asterisk. Lucas's voice cracked. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to forget. Elias reached out. Not to grab. Not to strike. He reached out, to touch Lucas's cheek. His fingers were ice. Not the cold of winter. Not the chill of death. The cold of absence. The cold of something that had been forgotten. Lucas didn't flinch. He didn't pull away. He closed his eyes. And for the first time in years, he cried. Not from fear. From grief. From guilt. From the unbearable weight of knowing that even the dead needed to be remembered. Elias's hand lingered on Lucas's face. Then it pulled back. Asterisk. You have a choice. Asterisk. Elias whispered. Asterisk. I can leave. I can walk out of this place. The world is different now. It doesn't remember me. It doesn't want me. I could walk into the night and vanish. Become myth. Become whisper. Lucas opened his eyes. Elias was looking at him, not with hunger, not with rage, with hope. Or, asterisk. Elias continued. Asterisk. You can let me stay. Asterisk. Lucas blinked. Stay? Asterisk. I don't want to be buried again. Elias looked around the cemetery, the crooked stones, the leaning trees, the moss-choked silence. I've been here too long. I've heard every footstep, every prayer, every lie. I've listened to the wind carry the names of the dead, and I've heard them fade. One by one. Forgotten. Erased. But you came. Every night. You didn't know me. But you stayed. He turned back to Lucas. Let me stay with you. Not as a ghost. Not as a monster. As a companion. The silence here is heavy. But your silence is quiet. And I am tired of being alone. Asterisk. Lucas stared at him. He thought of his empty apartment. The cold walls. The unanswered phone calls. The photos of his mother, gathering dust on the shelf. He thought of the nights he'd sat on the steps of the cemetery office, staring at the stars, wishing someone, anyone, would just say something to him. He thought of how, for 3 years, he'd whispered to a grave he didn't know, and how, for 3 months, he'd stopped, and how, in that silence, he'd felt more alone than ever. He looked at Elias Vorn, the man who had died alone, buried alive, and had waited for someone to remember him. And Lucas knew he didn't want to be alone anymore either. He nodded, just once. Elias smiled. It wasn't a horror. It wasn't a curse. It was relief. The frost receded. The ground settled. The corpse's body began to change. The rot softened. The skin grew less gray, less cracked. The hollows in his cheeks filled slightly. His eyes lost their milky haze. They became human. Brown. Warm. Sad. His coat reformed, not as tattered wool, but as a simple, clean black suit, buttoned neatly, as if he just stepped out of a funeral parlor. His hair grew back, dark and thin, brushed neatly back. His feet were no longer bare. He wore polished shoes. He looked alive, almost, but not quite. There was still a stillness about him. A quietness. A weight. He looked at Lucas. Asterisk. Thank you? Asterisk, he said. Lucas swallowed. What happens now? Elias turned toward the cemetery gate, where the iron bars sagged under the weight of ivy. Asterisk. I'll walk with you. Asterisk, he said. Asterisk. When you come back tomorrow night. I'll be waiting. I won't rise from the grave again. I won't scare you. I won't speak unless you want me to. But I'll be here. Just beside you. Asterisk. Lucas looked down at the grave. The dirt was smooth now. The moss had receded. The headstone was clean. A name had appeared, carved in elegant, old-fashioned script. Asterisk. Elias Vorn, 1842 to 1874. He remembered the forgotten. Asterisk. Lucas reached out. He didn't touch the stone. He touched the earth, and whispered, I'm sorry I forgot you. The wind stirred, just once. A single leaf, red as blood, drifted down from the tallest oak and landed on the grave. Elias smiled, and then he was gone. Not vanished, not disappeared, just gone, like a breath held too long, finally released. Lucas stood there for a long time. He didn't run. He didn't scream. He didn't call anyone. He picked up his flashlight, turned it off, and walked back to the cemetery office. He sat at his desk. He opened the drawer. He pulled out the thermos he'd used for 3 years. He filled it with water. He walked back to grave 47. He poured the water gently over the stone, and he sat beside it. He didn't speak. He didn't need to, because from the corner of his eye, he saw it. A shadow, just beyond the tree line, standing still, watching, not threatening, not hungry, just present. The next night, Lucas came again, and again, and again. He brought coffee. He brought books. He brought the thermos. He talked about his mother, about the loneliness, about the fear of being forgotten, and sometimes, in the quiet, he'd hear a voice, soft, warm. Asterisk. I'm here. Asterisk. He never told anyone, not the town, not the police, not the church. He knew they wouldn't believe him, and he knew, deep in his bones, that some truths are too heavy for the living to carry. But he didn't mind, because Elias was with him, not as a corpse, not as a ghost, but as a friend. The town of Willow's Edge never changed. The roads stayed quiet. The houses stayed dark. The cemetery remained untouched. But if you ever walked past Briarwood on a cold October night, especially when the moon was full, you might hear it. A low, quiet conversation. 2 voices. 1 young. 1 old. 1 alive. 1 remembering. And if you listen closely, you might hear the sound of a man pouring water over a grave, and then, just barely, the whisper of a reply. Asterisk. Thank you? Asterisk. Years passed. Lucas never left Willow's Edge. He grew older. His hair turned gray. His back bent. His hands trembled. But he still came to the cemetery every night. He still brought the thermos. He still sat beside grave 47. And every time, when the moon was full, he'd hear Elias's voice. Asterisk. You didn't forget me, Asterisk he'd say. Asterisk. No. Asterisk Lucas would answer. Asterisk. I never will. Asterisk one winter night, when Lucas was 72, he didn't come. He was too weak. He was dying. He lay in his bed, the cold creeping into his bones, the silence pressing against his ears. He whispered into the dark. I'm sorry, Elias. I can't come tonight. There was no answer. He wept. He thought he'd lost him. He thought he'd forgotten again. But as the last light faded from his eyes, he felt a hand, cold, but gentle, on his forehead. A whisper, softer than snowfall. Asterisk. I've been waiting. Asterisk. And then, peace. The next morning, the groundskeeper found Lucas's body in his bed, smiling. On the windowsill beside him sat a single, perfect red leaf. And in the cemetery, grave 47 was gone. No mound. No stone. No moss. Just empty earth. And beside it, a new grave, freshly dug, unmarked. But the soil was warm, and the grass growing there was green, even in December. People came, they whispered, they asked questions, they wrote articles, they called it a miracle, they called it a haunting, they called it coincidence. But the old woman who ran the general store, the one who'd been there since 1952, she just smiled. She said, "Some graves aren't meant to hold the dead," she said. "Some graves are meant to hold the ones who remember." And on the coldest night of the year, when the wind howled and the stars refused to shine, if you stood at the edge of Briarwood Cemetery and listened, you could still hear it. Two voices, one young, one old, one speaking, one listening. And between them, the quiet, the beautiful, terrible, sacred quiet of someone who was no longer alone. And someone who had finally, been remembered. And so, dear listener, the graveyard remains silent again. The soil smooth, the stones still, the night calm. They say Briarwood Cemetery is just another forgotten patch of land. But if you visit, and if you listen closely, you may hear scratching beneath the earth, or whispers drifting through the trees. Maybe it's the wind. Maybe it's your imagination. Or maybe Lucas Holloway is still trying to claw his way back to the world of the living. Thank you for walking into the dark with me tonight. Until next time, keep your lights low, your curiosity high, and your footsteps gentle. You never know what you might wake.